Welcome. Today, we're really getting into it, charting the incredible journey of Jane Eyre. We're going deep into the source material that follows this, fiercely independent spirit navigating the, frankly, crushing rules of 19th century England. We'll track her struggles, her big wins, and that constant search for self-respect.
It's such a compelling story because Jane is never really allowed to just settle. The narrative keeps placing her in these really stark, defining places and very intense relationships that constantly test her moral compass.
Right?
So what we want to do is track how she develops, understand this constant fight she's having between what society expects, duty, her station, and this incredibly strong desire she has for real love, and maybe most importantly for her own autonomy.
Yeah, being her own person.
Exactly. We're basically watching someone being forged, someone who demands spiritual equality in a world totally obsessed with class, and, well, who gets to be in charge based on gender.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, which really means starting with the trauma, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Gateshead Hall.
Gateshead. It's more than just an unhappy childhood home. It's really the place where Jane first learns just how harsh it is to be dependent.
She's only there because her uncle, Mr. Reed, before he died, made his wife, Mrs. Reed, promise, and the source calls it a hard-run pledge to raise Jane like one of her own kids.
And that promise, well, it pretty much evaporates the moment Mr. Reed dies. The source material's painfully clear about it. Mrs. Reed develops what's called an insuperable and rooted aversion to Jane.
Wow. Insuperable.
Yeah. It's not just dislike. She sees Jane as like this foreign object, an uncongenial alien who's invaded her family after her husband's gone. Jane's whole status is constantly attacked because she has no money. She's dependent, so in that house, she's basically treated as less than human.
And that dependency is used as a weapon, especially by her cousin, John Reed. He's just a petty tyrant, isn't he?
Oh, completely. And the source stresses this wasn't just occasional bullying. It was constant. Not 2 or 3 times in the week, nor once or twice in the day, but continually. Jane was terrified of him. Her flesh shrank when he came near.
That sounds awful.
And the cruelty is always about that class difference. John doesn't just hit her. He throws her status in her face. You are a dependent. You have no money. Your father left you none. You ought to beg and not to live here with gentlemen's children like us.
Ouch.
Yeah, and this is really key. Jane learns very early on that being poor and dependent makes her worthless in society's eyes. That feeling of shame. It fuels her later drive, her obsession really with making her own way.
And eventually all that relentless class-based bullying just pushes her too far. There's this explosive moment where she finally snaps.
Right, John hits her. And Jane's mind just floods with these images of like the worst tyrants in history, Nero, Caligula. She feels like she's fighting something desperate, something cornered. It's not a passive child's reaction. It's pure, passionate rage from someone pushed beyond their limit.
And the fallout is immediate. Chaos ensues, and the lady's maid calls her a madcat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's not seen as the victim fighting back. She's seen as dangerous, feral, something that needs to be locked up, which leads directly to the Red Room punishment.
Ugh. The Red Room.
Which is less about just being locked in a room and more about psychological terror, really.
It sounds like it. It's the room where her uncle died. Right. And they just thrust her in there. So she's got the physical isolation plus this intense, like, supernatural dread.
Totally alone. She even thinks about extreme things like starving myself to death.
Good grief.
But the real terror, according to the text, is this fear of the dead. She's afraid her uncle's ghost, maybe upset that his wife broke that hard-wrung pledge to look after her, might actually rise up to avenge the oppressed.
So it's not just a ghost story fair, it's tied into the injustice of it all.
Precisely. It's like the physical manifestation of all the broken promises and the moral rot at Gateshead. She's literally surrounded by the ghosts of that broken pledge.
But collapsing in there, it doesn't actually break her spirit, does it? It seems to almost sharpen her resolve.
In a way, yes. Because when Mr. Brocklehurst comes to assess her for Lowood School, Mrs. Reed sees her chance to get rid of Jane for good, and she tries to inflict one last wound, telling him Jane's worst fault is deceit.
The ultimate slander.
But Jane, even though she's still terrified and weak from the Red Room ordeal, she just refuses to be silenced this time. She lets loose all that pent-up fury. She calls Mrs. Reed bad, hard-hearted, accuses her of being deceitful, and screams she'll never call you aunt again as long as I live.
Wow, that must have felt liberating.
It's a huge moment of self-liberation. She's cutting those forced family ties.
But the source material is quite nuanced about how she feels afterwards, isn't it?
Oh, very. She feels this initial fierce pleasure, this satisfaction at having finally hurt her tormentor, but it fades really quickly, leaving this metallic and corroding remorse. She won the battle. Mrs. Reed left the room, but Jane feels like a black and blasted landscape after a fire.
So it's an early lesson. Rebellion is necessary, maybe, but it comes with a heavy psychological price. Leaves her isolated, but maybe more determined.
Exactly. Isolated but resolute. She's defined herself against that domestic tyranny, and now she's about to face a different kind of oppression.
Right, the institution, Lowood.
Lowood. Yeah, this environment swaps Mrs. Reed's very personal hatred for something more systemic. Neglect, religious hypocrisy. It offers a kind of stability, maybe, compared to Gateshead, but it's a stability built on hardship.
And her journey there just emphasizes how alone she is. She's whirled away on this long coach ride to what feels like remote and mysterious regions.
Yeah, her first sight of Lowood is this large, kind of irregular building. And there are 80 girls, all dressed identically in these brown stuffed frocks. It feels instantly cold, restrictive, almost like a convent.
And the reality hits hard right away. Physical hardship.
Definitely. The poverty is stark. You see it in the morning routine. The girls have to get dressed by the light of a rushlight, and sometimes they can't even wash because the water in their jugs is literally frozen solid.
Because of the keen northeast wind, the text says. Grim.
And the food situation is constant misery. The descriptions are quite graphic. Rancid fat, rusty meat for dinner. They're always hungry. The only relief is tiny portions of coffee, bread, and this thin oat cake.
So constant hunger, constant cold, that must just grind you down.
Physically and mentally, absolutely. And overseeing all this systemic neglect is the embodiment of religious hypocrisy himself, Mr. Brocklehurst.
Oh, yes. The black marble clergyman.
That's how Jane sees him when he returns. He's severe, rigid, and his main concern isn't the girls' welfare, it's their appearance. He actually goes on a tirade about their hair, insisting it must be cut short because he won't tolerate superfluous ornament or pomps and vanity.
While his own family shows up dripping in silks and furs.
Exactly. The hypocrisy is staggering. He preaches self-denial and plainness, while his wife and daughters are decked out in the latest fashions. It shows a total disconnect, and he uses his power to finish the job Mrs. Reed started.
Right, the public shaming.
He calls Jane out in front of everyone, denounces her as a liar and a little castaway, forces her to stand on a stool, the pedestal of infamy, she calls it, so the whole school can see her supposed shame.
That sounds like rock bottom for her.
It really is. But right at that lowest point, Helen Burns enters the picture. And Helen is like the perfect moral opposite of Jane.
How so?
Well, where Jane is all fire and resistance against injustice, Helen represents this deep, almost otherworldly patience. She endures constant torment from one teacher, Miss Scatcherd, who seems obsessed with Helen's tiny, minute defects and totally blind to her intelligence and goodness, her full brightness.
So Helen's response is just endure.
Pretty much. And she actually advises Jane against fighting back. She argues it's far better to endure patiently a smart which nobody feels but yourself. But she also gives Jane some practical perspective on Brocklehurst.
Oh. What does she say?
She basically tells Jane not to give him so much power in her head. Mr. Brocklehurst is not a god, she says, nor is he even a great and admired man. He is little liked here. It's a huge lesson for Jane. External authority isn't always legitimate or powerful.
That's quite insightful for a young girl.
Helen is incredibly insightful. But the most transformative thing she offers Jane is a spiritual perspective. She introduces Jane to the idea of an invisible world and a kingdom of spirits. She assures Jane that angels are watching, and even if the world scorns them, God waits only the separation of spirit from flesh to crown us with a full reward.
So it gives Jane a sense of worth that isn't tied to her circumstances.
Exactly. A moral framework, an enduring self-worth that exists completely outside the oppression of Gateshead or the misery of Lowood.
But here's a question that always comes up, I think. Does the book really endorse Helen's passivity? I mean, she dies, right?
Right.
Worn out by consumption, the condition.
Now that's the crucial point. Helen dies. Jane, the fighter, survives. The implication seems to be that while Helen provides this vital spiritual anchor, maybe some perspective, Jane's own passionate resistance, her insistence on self-preservation and earthly justice, is ultimately what's needed to actually survive that world.
It's a balance, maybe? And Helen's influence is probably made more bearable by Miss Temple.
Ah, Miss Temple, yes, the superintendent. She's the little bit of light in the darkness of Lowood. She actually takes the time to investigate Mrs. Reed's claims. She writes to Mr. Lloyd, the apothecary from Gateshead.
The one who saw Jane after the Red Room.
Right, and he confirms Jane's side of the story. So Miss Temple publicly clears Jane's name. That must have been huge for Jane.
Absolutely. And there's that lovely little detail, the forbidden supper.
Oh, the tea and toast. Yes, Miss Temple shares her own food with Jane and Helen, fragrant tea and toast. A small kindness. But Jane says she cherished it more than any of the forced luxuries back at Gateshead. These moments show Jane that genuine goodness, though maybe rare, does exist.
But the generally unhealthy conditions at Lowood eventually catch up with the school, don't they?
Tragically, yes. The poor food, the damp location. It leads to a typhus outbreak. Many of the girls get sick.
And this forces some kind of investigation.
It does. There's a public inquiry into how the school is run. The source says it was mortifying to Mr. Brocklehurst because it exposed all his neglect and hypocrisy.
Good. Served him right.
Well, yes. And it was beneficial to the institution in the long run. Things actually improved after that. But it comes after terrible loss, including Helen's death.
How does Jane find out about Helen?
Jane finds Helen actually dying of consumption tuberculosis in Miss Temple's own room. They have this final embrace late at night, and Helen is just so calm, accepting that she's going to her long home. It gives Jane this profound, first-hand look at spiritual peace, even in death. Really deepens that resilience Helen taught her.
So after all that, Jane actually stays at Lowood for quite a while.
She does. 8 years in total, 6 as a student, then 2 as a teacher. She gains competence, education, a secure routine. Lowood has done its job, in a way. It's shaped her.
But
Eventually, the routine starts to feel like a cage. After 8 years of this very structured, very isolated life, Jane gets restless. She starts yearning for, well, first just for liberty, then maybe just change.
And she settles on finding a new servitude.
Right. It's this fascinating progression. She recognizes that Lowood has become too small for her spirit. She's tired of the isolation, the monotony. And that internal desperation is what makes her place an advertisement in the newspaper.
For a governess position.
Exactly. She understands her place in society probably involves working for others, being in service, but she demands the right to choose where and for whom. She wants agency, even within the constraints of her class and gender.
And that advertisement leads her directly to Thornfield Hall.
Thornfield, yes. A huge shift. From the public institution back into the private domestic sphere. But this time, it's a sphere full of secrets.
She gets the job through a letter from a Mrs. Fairfax, who she initially pictures as this sort of comforting grandmotherly figure. Elderly English respectability, I think is the phrase.
Classic Jane Eyre misdirection. Thornfield itself is impressive, stately, but also really isolated, surrounded by these quiet, lonely hills. And Mrs. Fairfax, turns out she's just the housekeeper.
Not the lady of the house?
Nope. Related to the Rochester family by marriage, manages the place, but she's staff, just like Jane.
And Jane's student is Adele.
Adele Varens. Yes, a lively little girl, speaks French, a bit spoiled, like singing opera tunes and demanding attention. But despite these small reality checks, Mrs. Fairfax not being the boss, Adele being a handful 12, Jane actually finds contentment pretty quickly.
She likes the work.
She does. She makes reasonable progress with Adele, and she finds real satisfaction in just being competent, having stability. She has her own room, a bit of personal space. She feels she's finally on a respectable path, en règle, as the text says, properly set up.
But that comfortable routine doesn't last long, does it? Enter the master of the house.
Enter Mr. Rochester, and their meeting is anything but conventional.
The horse slipping on the ice.
Exactly. Jane's out walking on this lonely lane, it's icy, and suddenly a horse and rider go down. It's not some romantic, arranged meeting. It's sudden, messy, accidental.
And her first impression of him is quite specific.
Very. Middle height, dark face, stern features, definitely past youth, but had not reached middle age. She guesses maybe 35. And crucially, Jane notes she feels absolutely no fear of him.
Which is interesting considering his rather imposing description.
It is. And she adds that she instinctively avoids conventionally handsome, heroic men who she shunned as one would fire.
Why do you think that is? Is it her Lowood experience or something else?
I think it's partly her nature. She seems wary of surface perfection, maybe suspicious of the kind of social power that often comes with conventional good looks. Rochester, with his harshness and abruptness, feels more real, maybe, flawed. He presents an intellectual puzzle rather than a straightforward social archetype she feels she has to navigate.
He's not a standard romantic hero figure.
Not at all. And his reaction when he realizes who she is after she helps him back onto his horse is almost funny. Deuce take me if I had not forgotten. The governess.
Shows how much attention he pays to the household staff.
Right. Clearly preoccupied. A habit Jane will definitely challenge later on.
So once he's back at Thornfield properly, what's he like?
Changeful and abrupt. That's the description. He doesn't really do polite small talk. He immediately starts probing her, testing her mind.
And he asks to see her drawings, right?
Yes, her artwork, which is quite revealing. They're not typical young lady sketches. They're strange, striking, almost gothic images. There's one of a huge veiled head against an iceberg, another with an eye filled with the glassiness of despair.
So not exactly watercolors of flowers.
Definitely not. It's like her hidden inner world made visible. And Rochester sees it immediately. He tells her she's a vivid, restless, resolute captive hidden behind the disciplined Lowood constraint. He recognizes that fire inside her, that restlessness that actually mirrors his own tormented spirit.
And that recognition leads to something quite unusual for the time.
It's extremely unusual. He makes her his confidant. It's a massive breach of the social divide between master and governess. He starts telling her his life story, his past mistakes.
Why? Is he just unloading?
Partly, maybe. But he says he's seeking her clean conscience to sort of measure his own poison against. He tells her about his youth, this disastrous arranged marriage, the error, as he calls it, marrying Bertha Mason purely for her money, and then his affair in Paris with the opera dancer Céline Varens.
Adele's mother.
Adele's probable mother, yes. He tells Jane the whole sordid story, finding Céline with another lover, the Vicomte, challenging him to a duel, wounding him in the arm.
And he uses that specific word to describe the Vicomte's arm, doesn't he?
Etiolated, yes, which means pale, weakened, like a plant grown without sunlight.
Very deliberate choice of word.
Oh, absolutely. It's a judgment on that whole Parisian society he felt trapped in, decadent, weak, unnatural, corrupt. He's painting himself as a victim, you see. A victim of his family's greed and the continent's low morals.
And he's telling all this to Jane, the governess.
Because he sees her unique value. He says the more they talk, the better. He knows he can't blight. Her principles are too strong, but maybe she can refresh him.
So he values her moral compass.
He explicitly values her peace of mind, your clean conscience, your unpolluted memory. He contrasts it with his own poison of guilt and remorse. In that moment, Jane, the poor, dependent governess, is spiritually and morally superior to the wealthy master of the house.
That's a huge shift in the power dynamic.
It is. Her virtue becomes her strength, her currency. And that reversal is really the foundation of their incredibly intense and deeply complicated relationship.
A relationship that unfolds against this backdrop of secrets at Thornfield, the hidden horror.
Exactly. Which first really makes itself known with that chilling sound. Jane hears one night the demoniac laugh coming from the third story.
That must have been terrifying.
And Jane, showing her courage again, rushes out. And what does she find?
Mr. Rochester's bed is on fire. Someone clearly tried to kill him.
Right. And she saves him, throws water on the flames, puts it out. She acts immediately, not like a servant waiting for orders, but like an equal, a partner in crisis.
And then there's this incident with Richard Mason.
Soon after, yes, another late-night summons. Jane finds Richard Mason bleeding, wounded upstairs. Rochester is terrified, pale, telling Jane, I've got to blow, Jane. Clearly something violent and dangerous happening in that house.
And Rochester's explanation for all this is?
Vague, very vague. He tries to blame it all on Grace Poole, the servant who supposedly looks after the third floor. He calls her singular very.
But Jane doesn't buy it, does she?
Not at all. Her perception is razor sharp. She immediately sees the mismatch. Why would this coarse matronly servant wield such power over the master? Why would she be allowed to potentially commit arson and assault?
It doesn't add up.
No. Jane suspects quite rightly that some former caprice, basically, some past mistake or secret of Rochester's, has put him in Grace's power, giving her this secret influence. Jane knows the Grace Poole story is just a cover.
So after these really disturbing events, Rochester decides to host a house party.
It seems bizarre, doesn't it? He brings home this crowd of high society types, including Lady Ingram and her daughter, the beautiful Blanche Ingram.
Who is positioned as the likely future Mrs. Rochester.
Exactly. Blanche represents everything they are. Jane isn't wealthy, titled, conventionally beautiful, accomplished in that superficial society way. Tall, haughty, satirical. But Jane sees she has a barren heart.
And her mother, Lady Ingram.
Jane describes her as a splendid woman, but with this insupportable haughtiness and a fierce look that instantly reminds Jane of Mrs. Reed. It's like Gateshead all over again, but with titles. These guests just reinforce the brutal social hierarchy Jane's been fighting her whole life.
And Jane has to sit there and watch Rochester court Blanche.
She admits it's painful, torturous even. But again, her observation skills kick in. She notices Rochester watching Blanche with this ceaseless surveillance, almost like he's studying her, and she detects the obvious absence of passion in how he talks to her.
So even while she's hurting, she's analyzing.
Yes. And she comes to this quite cutting conclusion. Blanche is actually a mark beneath jealousy, because Jane feels Blanche is intellectually and morally inferior. Jane endures the snubs, the insults, like Lady Ingram saying Jane looks too stupid for charades, because her own sense of self-worth, her spiritual equality, makes her immune in a way.
Then the guests leave and Rochester finally makes his move.
He does. After putting Jane through that ordeal and using some clever, almost manipulative conversation to draw out her feelings, he proposes.
And Jane is overwhelmed.
Completely. She believes in that moment that the huge gap between the money, status, everything doesn't matter, which leads to that incredibly famous speech.
The equality speech.
Yes. She stops him and insists on her spiritual equality. I'm not talking to you now through the medium of custom conventionalities. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are.
Such a powerful statement, radical for the time.
Absolutely radical. She's essentially saying that their shared humanity, their connection on a spiritual and intellectual level, completely overrides all the social barriers society puts up. And Rochester, perhaps surprisingly, accepts it. But of course we know the whole foundation is rotten.
Because of the secret, which comes crashing down right before the wedding.
Dramatically so.
Yeah.
The night before, Jane has this terrifying dream where Thornfield is a ruin, clear foreshadowing. Then she wakes up.
To find someone in her room.
Yes, an apparition. Not even that strange woman, Grace Poole, she says. A terrifying figure.
But we later know is Bertha Mason.
Right. And this figure takes Jane's wedding veil, puts it on, then rips it in two before staring at Jane with this ghastly and red face. Jane is paralyzed with fear, convinced she saw a hideous demon.
The tearing of the veil. Pretty blatant symbolism.
Doesn't get much clearer than that, does it? The marriage is doomed before it even begins.
And then the wedding day itself. The climax at the altar.
It all falls apart. Mr. Briggs, the solicitor, and Richard Mason, Bertha's brother, arrive and stop the ceremony. Rochester is cornered, forced to admit the truth.
I have been married, and the woman to whom I was married lives. Bertha Mason is mad.
Devastating. He spills the whole story, then forced into the marriage for Bertha's massive fortune, £30,000, finding out too late about the family history of madness and addiction, that she was a Creole, born of a mad and drunken family, and already showing signs herself.
And that term Creole was loaded back then, wasn't it?
Very much so. In that context, English writers often used it to imply instability, otherness, a kind of inherent foreignness and moral weakness. Rochester uses this prejudice to frame Bertha as inherently monstrous, a hideous demon, justifying why he locked her away. Says he was cheated into espousing her.
And then he does something truly shocking.
He drags the whole wedding party upstairs to the third floor to show them Bertha, locked away like an animal. It's his desperate attempt to gain sympathy, to show them the monster he was tied to. It shatters Jane's world completely, but it also confirms her earlier suspicions about Grace Poole being just a cover.
So the wedding is off. What happens next?
In the terrible aftermath, Rochester makes one last desperate plea. He begs Jane to run away with him to the south of France. He argues the marriage to Bertha was basically invalid, a fraudulent, unjust compact. He wants them to live together as husband and wife in everything but name, ignoring English law and society.
He wants her to be his mistress.
Essentially, yes, though he tries to dress it up. But Jane's moral core, forged at Gateshead, tested at Lowood, is absolutely solid now. She refuses. She tells him living with him under those circumstances would make her his mistress, and calls his arguments sophistical is false.
It's that battle again between her love for him and her principles.
The ultimate battle. Her soul clung to him, she admits, but her conscience won't let her yield. She cries out, facing his anger and desperation, "I care for myself. I will keep the law given by God, sanctioned by man. I will hold to the principles received by me when I was sane."
I care for myself, that's huge.
It's everything. She realizes that principles matter most when your emotions are screaming against them. It's not just about obeying rules, it's about self-preservation. Becoming his mistress would mean throwing away the independence and self-respect she fought so hard for. She'd have his love, maybe, but she'd lose herself.
So she makes the incredibly hard choice.
An agonizing choice.
Yeah.
She leaves Thornfield in the middle of the night, even oiling the lock on the door so we won't hear her go. She chooses principle over passion, even though it means facing destitution and the fear that Rochester might completely fall apart without her. The cost is immediate and terrifying.
And that flight leads her to, well, rock bottom again.
Pretty much. She wanders for days, penniless, sleeping outdoors, reduced to eating berries. She gets to the point where she thinks death might be better than begging for cold charity. She's described as looking ghastly, wild, and weather-beaten when she finally collapses.
At the doorstep of Morehouse.
Exactly. Home of the Rivers, siblings. Diana, Mary, and their rather severe brother, St. John. The sisters are kind and take her in, but the initial reaction from Hannah, the servant, is pure suspicion.
Thinks she's a vagrant, up to no good.
Right. Fears she has ill plans against it. It just shows how vulnerable, alone, poor woman was perceived to be. Jane, terrified of being discovered by Rochester, gives them a fake name. Jane Elliot.
She recovers there, and St. John finds her work.
Yes, he recognizes her intelligence, even in her weakened state. He offers her a job as the village schoolmistress in nearby Morton. It's humble, £30 a year, a small cottage, but it's independence again.
And St. John himself is quite a character. Driven.
Very driven. His ambition is intense, focused on becoming a missionary. And he immediately sees something similar in Jane. He calls it an alloy in her nature, this restlessness that won't let her just settle down. He recognizes a kindred spirit, in terms of drive at least.
And then comes the big twist, the inheritance.
The biggest pivot in the whole story, really. St. John is sorting out family affairs and discovers a letter about an inheritance from their uncle, John Eyre of Madeira. As he's explaining the situation, he tells Jane the story connected to it.
Which turns out to be her own story.
Exactly. He recounts the tale of an orphan girl named Jane Eyre, educated at Lowood, who worked as a governess and nearly entered into an illegal marriage with her employer, a Mr. Rochester.
Jane must have been stunned.
Completely floored. She realizes she's Jane Eyre, the subject of the story, and that John Eyre was her uncle too. He died and left his entire fortune, a massive £20,000 to her.
Suddenly, she's not Jane Elliot, the poor schoolmistress. She's Jane Eyre, the heiress.
A life-changing amount of money. She's instantly transformed from dependent to incredibly wealthy and independent.
And her first act as an heiress is remarkable.
It really shows her character.
Yeah.
With resolute readiness, she immediately decides to divide the entire £20,000 into 4 equal shares. £5,000 for herself and £5,000 each for St. John, Diana, and Mary.
Why does she do that?
It's a profound statement. She refuses to hoard the wealth. Instead, she uses it to create her true family, not based on blood ties like the Reeds, which were toxic, but on shared values and chosen kinship with the Rivers siblings. And crucially, it makes her financially independent of everyone, including Rochester. The power dynamics are completely leveled now.
But that newfound independence brings her into conflict with St. John, doesn't it? In a new way.
A very different and maybe more insidious conflict. We find out St. John is actually deeply in love with a beautiful local woman, Rosamond Oliver. But he despises this feeling, calls it a love of the senses, unworthy of his higher calling.
His missionary ambition.
Right. He's determined to sacrifice his personal desires for what he sees as his call from heaven to go to India. His ambition is all-consuming.
And he sees Jane as useful for that ambition.
Exactly. His zeal becomes a kind of spiritual tyranny. It's a stark contrast to Rochester's passionate, earthly possessiveness. St. John sees Jane's intelligence, her resilience, her capacity for hard work, and decides she would be the perfect missionary's wife.
Not because he loves her.
Not at all. He explicitly tells her he doesn't offer love. He needs a wife. The sole helpmeet I can influence efficiently in life and retain absolutely till death. He sees her purely as an instrument, a tool for his great work.
He completely ignores her as a person, her feelings.
Strips her of her identity, and Jane sees it clearly. She resists, telling him plainly, I have a woman's heart, but not where you are concerned. For you, I have only a comrade's constancy. She refuses to sacrifice her emotional self, her passion, for his cold, duty-bound existence.
How does St. John react to her refusal?
Not with Rochester's fire and fury, but with something colder. He resorts to what Jane calls refined, lingering torture. He treats her with this icy, principled disapproval, uses emotional blackmail, essentially, trying to make her feel guilty and ungodly for refusing his divine plan for her life.
That sounds psychologically brutal.
It is. Jane feels that if she actually married him, this good man could soon kill me without drawing from my veins a single drop of blood. He would just slowly crush her spirit with his relentless repression, his denial of warmth and emotion. This whole experience is vital for Jane. It teaches her that spiritual control, spiritual servitude, can be just as damaging as being financially dependent or socially inferior.
She escapes one form of control only to face another, subtler kind.
Exactly. And it leads to the final crisis point in her journey of self-discovery.
St. John really ramps up the pressure, doesn't he?
Oh, intensely. He's praying over her, calling her a brand snatched from the burning, basically implying that refusing him is refusing God's will, damning herself. The psychological pressure is immense.
And Jane almost gives in.
She's pushed to the absolute brink. She thinks maybe it is God's will. Maybe she has to sacrifice her own heart, her own desires for this higher duty St. John represents. She's just about to yield.
And
Then something extraordinary happens. She hears a voice she knows, loves, calling her name. Jane, Jane, Jane.
Rochester's voice.
Yes. Though he's miles and miles away, she describes it as wildly, eerily, urgently calling to her. It seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once.
The supernatural moment.
That's how it feels. Her response is instant, visceral. I am coming. Wait for me. Oh, I will come. She rushes outside. And interestingly, she tries to rationalize it almost immediately. She concludes it was the work of nature. She was roused and did no miracle but her best.
So her own spirit responding, maybe, rather than literal magic.
Perhaps. The key thing is her crisis is resolved not by submitting to St. John's cold, abstract ideal of duty, but by answering this deep, undeniable call of human love, of connection to Rochester.
So she leaves Morehouse.
Immediately. Takes the next coach back towards Thornfield. But when she gets there,
It's gone.
a blackened ruin. Burnt down. Just about harvest time, the innkeeper tells her. Utter catastrophe.
And she learns what happened.
Yes, the stable groom fills her in. Bertha Mason had managed to escape her room one night. Grace Poole had apparently been drinking, indulging in her private bottle of gin, and Bertha set the whole house ablaze.
And Bertha herself.
Died in the fire. She was seen on the roof, wild amidst the flames, and eventually she jumped or fell to her death. A terrible, dramatic end.
But Rochester, what happened to him?
This is where Rochester finds a measure of redemption, perhaps. He acted heroically, got all the servants out safely first. Then he actually went back into the burning building to try and save Bertha, his wife, the hideous demon he'd kept locked away.
You tried to save her.
He did.
Right.
But his heroism had a terrible price. The falling timbers, the fire. He was badly injured. He lost the sight in one eye, the other was severely damaged, and he lost a hand. It's described as a mere stump, a ghastly sight.
So he survived, but blind and maimed.
Yes. Living as a recluse, a hermit almost, at a small, isolated manor called Ferndean, miles away.
Jane goes straight there, of course.
Of course. She finds him at Ferndean. His old dog, Pilot, recognizes her first, whining and barking. Rochester, unable to see, struggles. He hears her voice but thinks it might be Mary Rivers. He's trying so hard to see with those sightless eyes, unavailing and distressing attempt.
How does she reveal herself?
Gently, she speaks to him, brings him water, and the moment he touches her hand, recognizes her presence, the dynamic between them is utterly transformed. He's overwhelmed, vulnerable. He knows he has little left to offer her but his damaged self, yet his soul demands her. He's consumed by shame about his injuries, asking her if she finds his ruined hand disgusting.
But Jane is different now, too.
Completely. She's financially independent, thanks to the inheritance. She's morally secure, having refused both Rochester's illicit proposal and St. John's loveless one, and now physically, he's the dependent one. She has the strength, and she accepts him totally, unconditionally, meeting his shame and pain with compassion.
The power has completely shifted.
Absolutely. And in their conversations, Rochester reveals he's undergone a profound spiritual change. He tells Jane he now sees his blindness and mutilation as God's judgment, a necessary chastisement to crush his pride, his arrogance.
He sees it as punishment for how he treated her.
Explicitly. He believes the omnipotent snatched Jane, his innocent flower, away from him right when he was about to sully her by tricking her into that illegal marriage. He actually thanks God for the judgment, realizing it was necessary to humble him, to make him repent and become worthy of genuine love.
So he's found a kind of peace.
Hard-won peace, based on repentance and humility. Jane becomes his wife, truly his equal now. She describes how she becomes his eyes, his hands, how she rehumanizes him, bringing life and companionship back into his darkness. The old barriers, pride, status, convention, his physical dominance have all been burned away. literally and figuratively.
And he does regain some sight.
Yes, eventually. Enough to see dimly, like a ruddy haze, enough to perceive candlelight. And, most importantly, the ending tells us he regains enough sight to see their firstborn son. Their final union isn't based on passion overcoming obstacles, but on true parity, mutual need, and shared respect, built on the ashes of the old life.
What an incredible arc. Jane Eyre's final victory, it really wasn't about luck or someone rescuing her. It feels like it came entirely from her own resolute self-respect, that unwavering decision to follow her conscience, even when it led her to the brink of starvation.
Absolutely. And ironically, that very act of self-preservation, of refusing to compromise her principles, is what ultimately purified the relationship, allowing her to return to Rochester only when the pride and the societal imbalances that nearly destroyed them both had been purged by suffering.
It really makes you think.
And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you, our listener. Rochester gains true sight, not physical, but moral and spiritual insight, only after he's physically blinded and utterly humbled. The powerful master becomes dependent on the woman who was once seen as, well, the dependent governess, the slave or victim.
So the roles are complete reversed.
Completely. Which raises that big question the whole narrative seems to explore. If power corrupts and dependency can be so damaging, what needs to be destroyed, literally burnt down in this case, before real human connection, real equality, can actually flourish? And how does the person who was once the victim find the strength not just to survive, but to become the one who offers healing and support?
A powerful paradox indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the truly untamed heart of Jane Eyre.